So, good morning everyone. My name is Candy. I'm from the Philippines. Hello. And
I'm Arunima and I'm from India.
so our group decided to work on trans women discrimination in both Philippines and in India. And so in this discussion, we'll also be tackling how this issue affects both of us as individual advocates, and also how factors are affecting this discrimination of trans women in our country context.
Yes. Thank you, Candy. So over here, we would be looking at the transgender women in India, who are known as the Hijras, and in Philippines, who are known as the UPEACE. So I would start about the transgender women in India first, followed by Candy. Okay. So basically, the transgender women in India are known as the Hijras. The Hijras is a term which is used to describe women which are cross-dressed. Like they are men who are dressed like women. This is a term which is specifically used in India. In different countries, they'll have different terminologies. In India, they are generally recognized by people who are brightly colored and with heavy makeup, and they have a very special clapping style. And if you are in India, you cannot miss them. Like every Indian knows who a Hijra is. Like you cannot miss seeing them. And their clapping style is something which is unique to them. From when do they exist? They are existing before like 4,000 years. They've existed from years and years, and they have appeared in ancient texts for religious purposes, as luck and fertility. According to the 2011 census, this was the first census done to know how many transgender women we have in India. It was found that we have approximately 5 lakh Hijras in the country, but the number may be even more. They say it may be 6 or 7 times more, because many people don't want to identify themselves as transgender. So that may be hidden because of the stigma attached. Yeah, so now what they are. Just to let you know a little about the background of the Hijras, which is important at this point of time, is that India is a land of gods and goddesses. It is a land of superstitions. And there's a particular Hindu goddess which is called as Bahuchara Mata. Okay, the background of this lady is that she was basically the daughter of a warrior. She was traveling, and there was a bandit or a dacoit who attacked her. And in order to save her, she had to cut off her breast, and then she cursed the bandit with impotency. And the only solution or the penance for him was to dress like a woman and to behave like a woman. So this is how, and the Hijras believe that they come from, they are descendants of this goddess, and they are cursed. They are not the blessed one. They are the cursed ones. So they were in place of the bandit, and they have to dress like women and behave like women, so that they can come over that curse. If they do that, then they also believe that, and people believe, and the religion says that they have the ability to bless and the ability to curse. And if they are, and if you offend them or you turn them away, then their curse is really bad. So there's a lot of fear which is also attached to the presence of Hijras. Now, why Hijras need to today, why Hijras want to behave like women is not, because yes, they feel like women, that's the truth, but they also believe with the superstition that like in India, a woman is identified by her breast, and it is this essence of giving milk to the young one that identifies her. That's her strong point. So if a woman doesn't have breast, she's not a woman. So if there are these Hijras which have to behave like women, they need to have breasts. So that is the reason why many of them undergo some kind of a surgeries to get breast implantation and castration in order to get feminine characteristics. Yeah, so I think I've already covered all this, and yeah. So then we'll just see about where are they found. They are found all over India, but basically because nowadays, in the earlier times, they were found in the religious, in the king's palaces to take care of the harem of his queens, and they were also found in religious places in auspicious occasions. But today, they have lost that kind of an importance, and hence there's kind of widespread prejudice against them because people have the stigma against them. People feel that, one, they are the low caste people, so they are untouchables, and secondly, also because people feel that they are different, they are men behaving like women, so they're generally not accepted because of the narrow-mindedness of the people. So they are not finding any permanent homes for themselves. As a result, they are mostly driven in slums. Quite a lot of them are found in red light districts or even the rural areas or countrysides, because they are not the village people, they are not the urban people as well. Literacy, as compared to the 75% total literacy in India, that's only 46% for them. Why? Because one, they don't get admission in schools, and secondly, even if they are studying in schools, then because of the boys are having an effeminate nature, so they behave like women, they feel that they are women, so they suffer extensive bullying and harassment from other boys. So there's a dropout. And jobs, yes, because people don't give them jobs, so then they have no other option but to beg, to do menial jobs or indulge in prostitution. What are the problems they go through? Yeah, as I said, that they have to conform to the social pressure of, being a woman. So they have to do this breast enhancement and castration. Then they are also forced to beg because of no jobs. There are these gangs which are formed and kind of abduct these small boys and castrate them and turn them into hijras. So they are forced to beg those children. That's another thing that operates underhand. They are beaten, they are trafficked, raped, and they suffer from various sexual diseases. They don't get medicines for it because hospitals deny them admission. So as I said, the rights deny jobs, hospital beds, rooms in hotels, admission in schools, purchase or even rent a property, however rich a hijra may be, and adopt children and marry. So what is the legal apathy against them? There are really no laws for their protection. In India, consensual sex among the LGBTs is a criminal offense. So this goes against them, and the general insensitivity of the police. So even though sadly the Supreme Court in 2014 had kind of ruled, they have considered that transgenders is a third community. So you have male, you have female, and you have the transgender, which offers them some political and economic rights on paper, but generally it is not implemented, and there is widespread discrimination about them, and there is huge ignorance about them which threatens their lives. Why? Because as I said, in the same year, in 2014, when Supreme Court had said that they are transgenders, they also passed the law, that is section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, that consensual sex among homosexuals is criminal, and it was mostly targeted towards these transgenders. There's hardly any education about them, so people obviously see them as a nuisance, as a deviance, and impure caste, caste is a big problem in India. And also there are very few government policies for them. Very few NGOs work for transgenders. Mostly NGOs in India working for women, children, but for transgenders there are very few. So very few support and empowerment activities. Okay, so now give over to Candy for the Philippine context.
Right, so similar to the Indian experience, the transgender women in the Philippines is actually rooted in our historical situation as well. So we call them babaylans or babaylanes. These are priestess. We're talking about basically 17th century, so pre-colonial Spanish, pre-colonial times. So these babaylans and babaylanes are priestess. Some of them have characteristics of female, they're very feminine, and some of them are actually allowed by the community to even marry and have sexual relations with other men, right? But then when the Spanish came, they disappeared. So there's no documentation that will track what happened to the babaylans or babaylans. So most of the problems that is faced by transgender women in the Philippines is slightly similar to what Indian experience is. So of course discrimination is present. So in terms of, and these problems are actually related to their particular class and social standing. So there are transgender women, discrimination happens depending on the class. So if they are from impoverished urban poor or rural community, like these transgender women will have to work in salons and will work as like domestic helpers and all that, and discriminations happen in these small settings, so their access to resources, food, etc. And then if you're a middle class, like trans women, of course you don't have resources to actually do surgical enhancement, so you would have to settle for like not even a managerial work, but like going to fast food chains probably while struggling with your education. And then some of the transgender women who have actually enough resources that went through the procedure are actually celebrities or models, or they work in stand-up comedy bars. Okay, so discrimination in terms of their discrimination is also experienced, for instance, if they go through like different private establishments. So private establishments would mean like if they go to particular bars or restaurants, some of these owners would actually refuse them entry. And then in terms of private establishments as well, okay, that is done. And then education, there are some Catholic universities, because the Philippines is we're 80% Catholics. There are some Catholic universities that refuse admission to trans women. And there are also reported incidences before where these trans women are forced to sign a contract saying that if they are admitted in the university, they will not express their sexual identity at all. So we also said like religion is the source of the perpetration of discrimination against trans women. Okay. So in terms of health, just because the situation now is that a lot of these trans women actually take hormonal pills and surgical enhancements, not all health service providers would have the information needed to give to the trans women. So some of them are not like adequately briefed about how this would affect their health and well-being. So, and also some health service providers would have difficulties in accepting patients, trans women patients. So of course there's also no legal identity of trans women. So moving on to the next part, we're going to discuss our battering map for the individual first, and then in the context of our own countries.
Yeah, so this is my mattering map, and here I'm in the center. And so what I'm immediately surrounded by, my closest area of influence is one, my gender identity and sexual orientation of being a female, and the various social things which are attached to the men and women in India. Also affecting me directly is the strong Indian patriarchal culture, where a woman is subordinate to a man in many ways. Then, which also affects me is my family I come from. My direct family is my strong influence. My parents, my siblings, and the extended families, because in India we also have the joint family system. So what I am and what choices I make and my decisions are generally influenced by what the men in my family think. Class that I come from, in India we have like the lower class in terms of the income, the middle and the upper, and I belong to the middle class family, and therefore finance is also an influence on me. And then I come from a Christian religion, not from the country's prevalent Hindu religion, but I come from a Christian religion, and which has taught me to be non-judgmental and more tolerant towards people of all types, and therefore I do not see myself to be a person who discriminates people on the basis of caste. The second influence areas which affect me not directly but they are very much present is the group memberships that I belong to, the educational systems, or the communities that I live in, the city where I live in, how broad-minded and how narrow-minded it is, the place where I work, etc. The political beliefs in the country, because we have a lot of censorship in our country, and mostly there's a culture of silence. So that is also which affects my the way I think. My beliefs have been shaped, and also the way I react or respond to them. Education has played a key role in my life. I am one of those fortunate people in India who have been able to go to a postgraduate education. Not everybody does that, and that also has helped me in shaping my beliefs. Violence is something which is structural as well as cultural violence in India, which is hidden and very much seen also. So as much as I have experienced violence in many ways, I have also seen violence in many ways. The finance of the country, the GDP of the country affects me a lot, because the value of the Indian rupees in front of the dollar is tiny. So then like one in US dollar is around 66 times more than the Indian rupees, and therefore what is the economic condition of the country also governs some kind of decisions that I need to make. Social media, we have two kinds of media. One is the conventional media, and the other is the social media. I have been influenced by both, but mostly my beliefs in the childhood were shaped by the conventional media, but now I conform myself more to the social media, which is able to spread greater information, and I am able to share my ideas with like-minded people in a better way through the advanced social media. Quite similar, I identify myself with the trans women also. This is the matrix map for the transgenders in India, and here I've put the hijras in the center. They are affected by almost similar things like me. Yes, the sexual orientation, they are sexual, biologically they are males, but they have a bent or an inclination towards the women. They feel that they are women, and also they have to become women in order to conform to that image. They are affected by the strong Hindu religion, because the hijras are the term which comes from the Hindu religion. So as much as the Hindu religion affects them and kind of goes against them, but still they conform to that religion and they have to behave and act according to that. They are affected strongly by the caste system in India because they are the bottom rung, they are the untouchables, outcast or out of caste group. So they know that everything is above them. So they are like really pressed down. Then the family affects them because mostly if a child like that is born in a family, it is believed to be a curse, and therefore family would abandon such a child. And the class, they belong to the lowest income group, and so they are very poor. The second circle that affects them, as we have already seen, is that they are denied jobs, health services are denied to them, the group membership they conform to is only the Hijra community. They are not accepted by other communities. There is generally this culture of silence, so laws are not really helpful for them. Education, again the education system turns them down. There have been very few fortunate Hijras who have been able to get the advantage of good education and have been able to do something good with themselves. The last thing is lack of government and NGO provisions for them. Violence is prevalent. There is, as I said, forced begging, rape, sexual exploitations. So they are generally also beaten up on the roads because they see that a man is behaving like a woman or a man is dressed like a woman, and so there's a lot of stigma behind it. So they are abused. Substance abuse, yes. In order to overcome their traumas, they often indulge themselves in a lot of substance abuse, and also because of widespread poverty, they live in slum areas, red light areas, where the peer pressure of doing substance abuse is huge. Then the media affects them. What the media, the social media is one of the strengths which may give good information about them and help people in awareness. But the conventional media actually goes against them and may be responsible for kind of creating more discrimination against them among the people. Language, they have, if they are uneducated, they wouldn't be able to conform to the common language that people are speaking, and they often develop their own lingo which most of the people don't know about. And definitely the GDP of the country affects them because if there's inflation in the country, it affects the rich and the poor in the same way.
Okay. So this is the mapping map for the trans women in the Philippines. So you can see, like at the center, I just included their photo of different hands just to show the diversity and also the need for them to assert themselves and then be acknowledged. So the first circle actually is family and friends. So for trans women, it's difficult. We say trans women, like in the Philippines, there is no particular separate subcategory for trans women who did not undergo surgical enhancements and those that have undergone. So in this particular process, the family and friends of these trans women have to be involved in this process. So it affects them, for instance, like because transitioning to becoming a woman is a big change, right? And then because the Philippine culture is also, we are very close to our family and our relatives and also like friends. We keep that kind of connection. So their views are important to how the trans woman will shape herself. And the next is, of course, religion. So we are dominated by Catholics, but we also have the Muslim minority. And there are incidences of discrimination also for not only trans women, but the LGBT community who happen to be Muslims as well. So this religion, of course, plays on how they will shape or how they will decide on eventually transitioning to becoming a woman. And then these people are the mindset, the cultural mindset. While the culture now in the Philippines is actually very open to this, there are still several mindsets that are still very conservative and traditional. So for a trans woman to eventually decide on becoming a trans woman, she has to work and think about these kind of culture as well, like mindset. So the next circle is, this is the log of the Philippine government. So definitely the government plays a huge role in providing a sort of protection for trans women. So protection would mean government policies or laws that will eventually ban discrimination against trans women. And education is important for trans women, and also the sense of community, the support group for them. Health is of course, very important. In the Philippines, there's the HIV/AIDS cases are increasing. And for reasons of protection, like government authorities are not disclosing the extent of like statistics. So how many percent is HIV, how many patients are like male homosexuals, trans women and all that. So they're not, based on protection, for the trans women's protection and LGBT community in general, they're not releasing this document. But the numbers are increasing. So it's very important for the trans women to also be involved in their healthcare, and the government to actually provide that safe space for them to access such healthcare. And employment, work is important for them to actually live a life of dignity. They have to find, the government has to provide them a meaningful economic opportunity. Okay, and then the outer circle would be, this is the social media, the influence of social media. And okay, that is your traditional media. Trans women are portrayed to be portrayed in Philippine media as traditionally like models or people who would want to enter beauty pageants. And these are also women who, the stereotype is that these are women who have enough money to support their boyfriends or their partners, potential partners. So that's how they are portrayed in media. And so that has to change, definitely. And that particular icon is also about social mindset and culture. And NGO and government institutions' mindset has to change as well. Change in the sense that they have to update all their processes and basically apply a trans women friendly lens. When I was going through like the initial research for this particular topic, in one document released by UNDP and UNAIDS, they said that there's not enough research to deal with and to discuss and analyze issues confronting trans women, Filipinas. So that has a lot to do, I think, the initiative. If there's a gap somewhere, the initiative should come from at least like cause-oriented groups or civil society. So the NGO plays a huge role in that aspect. So this is my individual marketing map, and I am a Filipina human rights defender working, of course, in the Philippines and in Asia. I come from a middle-class family, but in the last years of my work, I work in this kind of framework that whatever I accumulate, I give back to the community. So I put myself in the center of that, of this patterning map, and it is important for me to be able to function efficiently and productively. It's important for me to keep my balance. So my family keeps me balanced, and friends, of course, and health and well-being. Okay, this is balance, and then education and work in terms of it provides me enough economic security to do and pursue advocacies that I really want to do, but not financially satisfying. So, and also the work in terms of work in advocacies gives me meaning. And the second circle is about education, and then government, like politics. Politics in the sense that I engage political institutions and political structures. peace is important for me, world peace, inner peace. And the last circle is about, this is things that is important to me and may actually influence me in my work. So the mindset, the cultural mindset, religion, of course, just because when you deal with trans women issues, you have to also eventually face the stigma and stereotypes and prejudices of the Catholic community. Finances, so if most of the NGOs in the Philippines are not financially rewarding, so, and I refuse to be, I refuse to be hampered by this particular issue, but then eventually it will influence me in my work. And then social media, and of course the government is very important, and the sense of community. Alright. So when we identified our mattering maps, we also identified similarities for our joint intervention. So for families and friends, we said that one of the strengths of both Philippines and India is that families and friends are the immediate support group. They serve as that closely knit support group. And transgenders can actually access their resources, and some of them have actually been taking decision-making roles. So in the Philippines, like what I mentioned earlier, there is a need to have a psychosocial support program that will involve the family and friends of these trans women, especially during the transition phase.
And in India, what I thought first was important to conduct counseling programs for the families, because it's very important for the families and social circles to be educated and to know what transgenders are and to accept them wholeheartedly and not to abandon them because of some social pressure.
Okay, so what I mentioned earlier, this high stigma in the Catholic Church. And so the intervention here is try to involve more church leaders in socio-civic activities with transgenders, and also vice versa. So inclusion of transgenders in a religious program.
And in India, what we find is that the main problem in India is the prevalent superstitions. And so there's a high stigma in the Hindu religion that the transgenders are cursed people, and they belong to the low caste, so they are impure. So basically what we would try to do is conduct education for the religious priests to help them change this cultural discrimination and exclusion of the transgenders, which generally the Hindu mentality or society has towards them, because since the country is so driven by religious values, if the religious leaders come out strongly in support of the transgender, the people would tend to listen more.
Okay, so another problem that we want to intervene in is actually the lack of policies in the Philippines and also contradictory policies in India. So in the Philippines, there is a law. It's called anti-discrimination law, but it's broad. It covers all forms of discrimination, and usually the LGBT issues are lumped in one category of vulnerable groups, right? So there is a need to either amend that law to distinguish like different needs of transgender community, or create an entirely separate one for the Philippines. And also target public and private agencies to plan and implement projects for transgender community. So I mentioned, like in terms of healthcare, those health service providers who give out surgical enhancements and all that, they need to be informed as well and educated in terms of what other support they should give to transgenders.
And in India, firstly, we have to address this irony, because although they are being recognized as the third gender, but still the consensual sex between them, between homosexuals and transgenders, is a criminal offense, and therefore the government or the police gets every excuse to physically or violently exploit the transgenders. So we have to fight this irony, and the intervention that we could probably think about is implementation of the Yogyakarta principles This is basically, it's quite similar to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is not a UN proposal, but it is similar to it because all the 30 human rights laws which are outlined in the UDHR, the Yogyakarta principle tries to modify them for the transgenders. So it is basically a principle for applying international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. So it is for the transgender friendly principles which could be applied or maybe looked into. Secondly, we have to work more on policy making so that transgenders can enjoy equal legal rights and protection among the citizens, and for this the NGOs play a very important role, because the NGOs and the government institutions can come out with a proposal of policies for more acceptance of the transgenders into the community.
Okay. So healthcare, I will just go briefly on this, but it's similar to what I said before, like healthcare service, especially those transgender who are taking in hormonal pills, they should be educated on what these effects are, how this will affect their health. And okay, so in terms of non-discriminatory practices, hospitals should not be allowed, should be prohibited from refusing any patients and transgender women, especially.
Okay. And in India, as we said, that healthcare services are denied to them, and they are not given beds in the hospitals. We need to have special medical practitioners and special wards for the transgenders in hospitals so that their healthcare needs can be catered to. The stigma still lies in the country. Why I'm saying a separate bed or a separate ward for them is because if they are lying in the general ward, if they are present in the same room where others are also present, then maybe others will kind of create problems. So in order to provide them some peace and better treatment, it is important for hospitals to have special wards for them. And also because of the stigma of conforming to the group image is huge on the transgenders, they undergo breast enhancements and castration, which is illegal in the country. So they do this kind of surgeries through the, they call as quacks. They are people who are not really trained in doing any kind of medical treatments, but many transgenders die because of this quack treatment. So if there is supervised medical care to help those people who really want a breast enhancement, then that should be provided for them so that they don't go for the illegal ones.
Okay. So in the Philippines, there's also, in the last 3 years, there's incidences of violence committed against trans women. There's one very popular case now. A trans woman named Jennifer Laude was raped and killed by a U.S. Marine, and the case is going on. And then after that incident, there were other reports that the similar thing happened in different regions of the Philippines, like towards the south, like Visayas area and Mindanao area. And okay, so we're saying that here that there should be an increase in stricter laws and awareness amongst the security forces, especially police as well.
Okay, so media projection is common to us. So basically, in India, the main problem of violence is that because of the kind of stigma that or kind of outcasting that happens with the transgenders, they are a secluded or they are an excluded group in the community. So in order to survive, what the transgenders normally engage in is kidnap the small boys who have been abandoned from the families or the street kids and forcefully castrate them and turn them into feminine and then force them to beg. So that is one kind of violence that happens. Castration is definitely a violence against them. definitely do not need to go through this. Human trafficking is huge and prevalent among the Hijra communities. Road molestation and domestic violence, like when a child is in the family who is identified as a transgender, the kind of the violence which is to the child from the family members is also huge. Okay, now we want to talk about some of the common things that we can do in India and Philippines both. That is media projection. What are the interventions we can do through media is we should lobby for more transgender inclusive TV programs, especially the primetime shows, the news and the documentaries, and we can help transgenders to become anchors of fashion, music and film awards, ceremonies, etc., providing them greater platform for sharing their testimonies and making documentaries about the facts of transgenders and the various, and clearing out the various misconceptions that people have towards them. Okay, so I think we have already done a lot about the education system that needs to go about them. We have also talked about the role of the NGOs and the GOs, etc. So we would just look for some of the strengths and the opportunities that is on our side when we work with the transgenders. One is, as I said, with the social media growing, awareness is growing about the transgender women in both India and Philippines. There are examples of transgenders which have been able to stand for themselves and which have been able to speak for their communities. They are getting greater platforms for voices in the media, in the government and in the social fields. And for both of the countries, language is definitely a common tool for sharing, because in India and Philippines, English is the official language. The weaknesses that we see in our interventions would be there are lack of policies and laws for protection of the transgenders. There is very less funding for them, and we may soon dry out. And there's a general negligence of the country towards minority issues. The threats that may be coming up for India and Philippines is the changing political nature, because as parties change, every political party may have its own belief systems, and so that would affect our work with the transgenders. And we also foresee a potential backlash when we speak for the transgenders or for the advocates who propose for them. There might be a backlash against them from the community. I would just like to, despite this, there have been many transgenders who have been able to swim against the tide and have been able to come strongly in the community as successful people and have been able to educate people more about what transgenders really are. For example, Kalki Subramaniam is the first entrepreneur, a transgender entrepreneur. She is a news anchor. She is the first principal, first transgender principal for a school. She's the first transgender mayor for her ward, and Bharati is the first transgender pastor in her village.
Okay, in the Philippines, we have Gina Rosero. She's a transgender model, and then very recently went into an international modeling company. And we also have, we call it Ladlad. It's an LGBT political party, and the chairperson is a trans woman, Dems Benedito. And we now have student leaders who are trans women. So Hart Dino and Pat Bringas are from the University of the Philippines, which is the premier state university in the country.
So we have a short video to show you as to how the transgender women in India have been brought out by the NGOs in order to educate people.
Transgenders, better known as Hijras in India, are not like their counterparts elsewhere in the world. Indians consider them sacred, touched by God. Their blessings are auspicious and generally accompanied by their signature clapping. They're often invited to bless newborns and newlyweds. In fact, most hijras make their living by exchanging blessings for cash at traffic signals. With the help of hijras, we wanted to educate reckless motorists about a very basic safety procedure they constantly ignored.
कृपया ध्यान दीजिए। ये attention please। अगर पायलट के जैसा गाड़ी चला रहे हो तो पायलट के जैसा सेफ्टी भी चाहिए। मेरी गाड़ी में ऑक्सीजन मास्क नहीं है, कुर्सी के नीचे लाइफ जैकेट नहीं है, मतलब सीट बेल्ट तो है, तो पहना क्यों नहीं रहे? मैं सिखा दूं क्या? इधर से बेल्ट ले लो और अपने बॉडी के सामने से खींचो और जांघों के बाजू में ऐसा फिट कर लो। जब तक क्लिक नहीं सुनाई दे, इतना गोरा गोरा हो, एक्सीडेंट के बाद अच्छा नहीं लगेगा। हे नातीगा, तेरे बॉयफ्रेंड को बोल दे सीट बेल्ट ऐसा पहनने का। हे चिकना मार, वीडियो मत ले, सीट बेल्ट लगा, सीट बेल्ट पहनो